the bankers in the Western world will continue to inflate the money supply until they get to a point where they can't anymore. And they will pay for all the deficits with inflation until they can't. And at the point that they can't, they'll switch to taxation. And the taxation will come, it'll come progressively in the form of income taxes. And then the third phase, it'll come in the form of property taxes. They won't be able to raise enough money with income tax, so it'll become a property tax. And before you recoil in horror, just keep in mind in Florida, there is no income tax, but there is a property tax, and it's 2% a year on all of your real estate property. Maybe they'll assess the property up and it becomes 2% of property that's worth 50% more, and they raise their taxes 50%. Or maybe they'll extend it from just your residential real estate to commercial real estate to other forms of property. I think it'll be a political process. There'll be a lot of back and forth negotiation. Each state will do it differently. Each city will do it differently. Each country will do it differently. Each administration will do it differently. But eventually, they'll start taxing things more. Maybe they'll say 2% of all your stocks, 2% of all your crypto, 2% of all your everything. I don't know. What I do know is that Bitcoin is the best property to hold when that time comes. As we look forward, there'll be inflation, and you want to own property to protect yourself from inflation. But you want to own the highest quality property, and the definition of highest quality property is hardest to steal, hardest to tax, easiest to move, most desirable by everybody on earth. Also, easiest to upgrade. Why is an acre in New York City more valuable than an acre in the middle of Kansas? They're both an acre. The acre in New York City is more valuable because A, it's built on granite. It's very solid. You can build a 100-story building on it. It's not sand. It's not soil. But the second reason it's more valuable is because you can develop it into more things. There's a huge amount of demand for land in Manhattan or property in Manhattan because there's all this economic density in Manhattan. So you want to own the property where you can get the density, right? You could, in theory, put 10,000 people onto that acre in Manhattan, but you can't do that on that acre in Kansas. So if you're going to own property in cyberspace, what property do you want to own? If you own the Bitcoin property, right? Bitcoin you can develop because it's an open protocol. So you can build thousands of layer 2 and layer 3 applications on it anywhere in the world. That's why you want to own that. That's why Bitcoin is, if you have $1 billion of Bitcoin, that's why it's better than $1 billion of gold, or $1 billion worth of land, or $1 billion worth of real estate, or $1 billion worth of a company. All of those are properties, but they're easier to impair, harder to develop, harder to move. So if you're taking the long view, find the highest quality property you can, hold it for the long term. And I wouldn't worry so much about the political process, right? If the politicians pursue rampant inflation, the highest quality property will benefit. If they start to do income tax, if they crank the income tax to 90%, you want to own the highest quality property because that's the property that you don't have to sell. The way you avoid income tax is you never sell it. Low quality property can be impaired. And if you think it can be impaired, you have to sell it. And when you sell it, you'll take a capital gains tax. If you want to move from here to Monaco, you'll have to sell your property in wherever you live in order to go to Monaco, and you won't get hit with a capital gains tax or an income tax.
Right.
So high quality property protects you from income tax. And then finally, high quality property protects you from property taxes, because ultimately the highest quality property is going to be the hardest to tax. Compared to California, taxing of buildings in California, if I tax 5% of the real estate property in California, I'm going to get it all.
Mm-hmm.
If I tax 5% of the companies in California, I'm going to get that too. If I tax 5% of the Bitcoin in California, it's all going to move.
Yeah.
And so if you're making a law in California about what to tax, what's the point in taxing something that's going to move away from you when you tax it? And so that's my way of saying if it's the apex property, people aren't going to try to tax it as hard because it's hard to tax and they won't be successful. And so if you're not going to be successful, then there are fewer people attempting to target you as the victim. And let's say in the worst case now, like how are you going to tax Bitcoin in the US? You can't tax it at the LA level. You can't tax it at the California level. You have to tax it at the federal level. So I can tax it at the federal level, and then people will move out of the country. And then you say, well, that's okay. If you're a citizen, you still got to pay it. Well, then I sell it to a non-citizen. See, then the question is someone that's not a US citizen going to want to own this? And can I transfer it to them? They're not going to want to own your company in Chicago. They're not going to want to own your house on Lakeshore Drive. They're not going to want to own your ranch in Kansas. They're not going to want to own the building in New York, but they will want to own the Bitcoin. And so what you've got is this regulatory arbitrage where there will always be somewhere in the world where they're going to want this thing, and that somewhere will be the highest bidder. And so when California, let's play this thought experiment out. If the governor of California were to levy a 50% a year property tax on a building in California, what do you think the price of buildings in California would do?
Decrease, everyone would leave.
Let's make it simple. Let's just tax them 100%. Okay, so you have $1 billion worth of real estate property in California. What's it worth after I tax it 100%? Nothing, right? That's called expropriation. Does it happen? Yes, it does happen. It's a socialist and communist thing when it happens. It happened in Venezuela to the oil company. It happened in Argentina. It does happen. Could it happen in the US? Yeah, sure it could. You know, so when the politicians expropriate some portion of your property, what's a rich person in Monaco going to pay you for that? That's the question you ask yourself. And the answer is they're not going to pay you anything. They're not going to want to. When I tax your building in California 10% a year, it's going to be worth like 1/5 of what it was the day before I tax it. Will you be able to sell that to a rich person in Monaco? Probably not. But if you could, you sell it at 20% of what it was worth yesterday. But when I tax your Bitcoin at 20% a year, the day before that tax goes into play, you're going to sell it to someone who's the high bidder in the world, and they're going to pay you the pre-tax level. So if you're looking to protect your wealth, right, the way to protect your wealth is with a universally desirable scarce asset, which is portable and fungible.
比特币这个史无前例的发明，不一样的货币需要一张不一样的卡，一张金属卡专门为加密货币设计。每一次消费可以立即获得3%的回馈。想要更多吗？没问题，你可以自由选择。全面整合到手机，满足所有加密货币需求，一站搞定。不喜欢管理费和国际手续费吗？这边通通不收，还有这些全额补贴优惠。未来已经到了，马上办理，奖金归你。
You know how you have a shock wave? A shock wave forms when you move faster than the air. If I move through the air faster than the air can flow around me, then I create a shock wave. I'm disrupting laminar flow and I'm getting turbulence because I'm going too fast. Okay, Bitcoin is creating turbulence because it's going too fast. Right? When you see some uninformed politician that critiques it, it's because they were asked to have an opinion and they had 10 minutes to study it. And so they give an uninformed opinion. When some billionaire investor says they like gold better, it's because they're asked to have an opinion and they spent 30 years studying gold and they haven't spent 30 hours or 300 hours or 1,000 hours studying Bitcoin. They had 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 15 minutes. A lot of people, when these editorials are written in the Journal and the New York Times, I never seen anybody ever say, oh, I spent 1,000 hours studying Bitcoin. Let me break down my problems with it. I never seen anybody say, I spent 100 hours studying it. Let me tell you the 13 problems I have, There are no informed critiques. I have yet to see them. There are uninformed critiques. And what is that? That's the same as your fighter jet slamming into a wall of air faster than the speed of sound, and you get a shock wave, and you get turbulence, and you get heat, and you get sound and fury. And is that a bad thing? Just means we're moving fast, right? We're moving very fast and we're getting noticed, and everyone has to notice it, right? And when you're asking the spokesperson for the Kremlin, for Putin, whether or not Russia is going to adopt Bitcoin as the national currency, that's not, when they say not yet or no, that's not a negative signal. That's a positive signal. Nobody asked Putin whether they're going to adopt Apple stock or gold or silver or the giant stone coin of the Yap people as currency in Russia, right? There's only one question they're asking them. And they're asking them the question because it's on the table, and that's indicative of the success of Bitcoin.